Hello viewers, I am going to present before you the module Public Policy, Alternatives, Choices and Decision Criteria. The objective of this unit is to discuss the policy decisions, decision alternatives and evaluating alternatives, group decision making, identifying alternatives in decision process, selection of solutions for effective decision making. Introduction. The field of decision making in public administration and management is quite significant as it has particular bearing for public managers and administrators. In the complex field of service delivery and program, public managers are often placed in the position of having to make a variety of decisions ranging from routine situations to non-routine and unstructured situations. Making a good decision is something that every manager endeavors because the overall quality of administrative or managerial decisions goes a long way in determining the organization's success or failure. McKinney says the reaching of a decision is the core of administration, all the other attributes of the administrative process being dependent on, interwoven with and existent for the making of decisions. To quote Simon, the task of deciding pervades the entire administrative organization. As a process and as an analytical construct, decision making emerged in the post-World War II period as part of the policy making and behavioral approaches to public administration. Decision making defined in the words of Terry, decision is the selection of one behavior alternative from two or more possible alternatives. It is the outcome of judging any particular situation. Justice and Miller define decision as a complex of some combination of one or more judgments and one or more choices. In the general context, judgment involves arriving at some understanding of situations, probabilities, causes and consequences, and choice involves the selection of appropriate courses of action. Justice and Miller are of the view that decision making can intend to achieve a better state of the world or to preserve an existing desirable state of the world. But it is significantly complicated by the twin challenges of uncertainty about the probability of events and consequences and the ambiguity concerning causes, effects and preferences. While uncertainty can be reduced through the systematic collection of information about reality, ambiguity undermines the foundations of rational judgment and choice and points to the employment of practical reasoning and logistics of appropriateness. Coming to group decision making. Important decisions that have far-reaching impact on organizational activities are always made in groups. Group decisions have their own set of advantages. In the first place, a group will generate more alternatives that reflect their diversity of experience than an individual acting alone. Thus, group decisions may be perceived as more legitimate than individual decisions. The fact that individual decision maker has not consulted others may sometimes create a perception that a decision was made autocratically and arbitrarily. Group decisions are also not without their disadvantages. A group always takes more time to reach a decision than in the case of an individual. Even within a group, a dominant minority can have an effective influence in the final decision. Moreover, group thinking undermines critical thinking in the group and eventually hampers the quality of the final decision. In a group decision, there is a dilution of the responsibility. Problems involving decisions basically arise out of the efforts to provide efficient processes for arriving at collective decisions and reconciling them with individual ones. Indeed, it is a problem of reconciling efficiency in decision processes and outcomes with popular democracy. In other words, problem implicates the question of balancing elites and mass roles in decision making. These elites may serve in administrative positions to decide matters on their own or on the public interest. Policy making and decision making. Vickers makes a distinction between policy making and executive decisions when he points out the first being designed to give direction, coherence and continuity to the courses of action for which the decision making body is responsible. The second designed to give effect to the policies thus laid down. Policy making involves decision making, but every decision is not a policy decision. Generally, administrators take decisions in their day-to-day work within the existing framework of policy. Policy decisions thus provide a sense of direction to the course of administrative action. Decision analysis. Decision analysis is concerned with the use of information and knowledge of the decision process. It aims to provide explanations as to how a decision should be made or a series of decisions came to be made. Decision analysis therefore requires that we understand the way in which facts and values interact and the way in which ideas, interest or values on the one hand interplay with information and reality or facts on the other hand. Types of decisions and their styles. Depending on the type of problem a public manager or administrator faces in a decision-making situation, it is possible to categorize the types of decisions. They are A. Routine and B. Non-routine decisions. Simon categorizes decision types into programmed and non-programmed or ill-structured. Programmed decisions. Programmed or routine decisions are of administrative or procedural nature governed by the traditional mores of the organization, the public agency which is governed by established rules and legislative mandates that circumscribe its activities. In routine and repetitive decisions, definite approach is worked out for handling them. Programmed decision making is relatively simple and tends to rely heavily on previous solutions. Issuance of licenses, award of contracts and distribution of uniforms to scavengers or preparation of electricity bills are examples of programmed decisions. In such decisions, public managers have little discretion to exercise. In many cases, programmed decision making becomes decision making precedent. In routine cases, a manager can use a procedure that responds to a structured problem. Nowadays, some software programs are being designed that automate routine and complex procedures. Invariably, public managers use rules frequently when they face a structured problem. In addition to the use of systematic procedure and rule, the public manager falls back on a policy that provides guidelines and parameters to the decision maker in a specific direction. Next, non-programmed decisions. In contrast to programmed decisions, non-routine or ill-structured decisions involve complex problems for which no precedent or previous solution exists. Deciding whether or not to shut down a loss-making unit or what type of strategy is needed for a terror strike are examples of non-programmed decisions. Such decisions are unique and non-recurring. When an administrator faces an ill-structured problem, there is no cut and dried solution. Radford describes some of their primary characteristics listed as follows. First, only limited information is available with regard to the problem. Second, the individual facing the problem may have more than one objective, some of which may be in conflict. Third, more than one participant in the decision process may have the power to influence the choice among alternatives. Fourth, disagreement may exist over the priority to be assigned to various objectives as well as over the methods of evaluating progress. Fifth, the particular problem being discussed may be linked to other problem situations. For routine administrative decisions, information is processed to the extent that it matches the required input format. At the extreme, individuals in a public agency may be required to make decisions based on limited information. Coming to decision styles. In addition to different decision types, structured and unstructured, the context of decision making in public organizations also involves alternative decision styles. Decision making styles, therefore, can be classified briefly in three ways: autocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. An autocratic decision style would be the one in which a public manager makes decisions with little or no consultation from others. Managers using the autocratic style make quick decisions and focus on the short run. Their efficiency and speed in making decisions often result in their making decisions with minimal information and with assessing fewer alternatives. But in crisis situations, this form of approach is necessary as time becomes a critical factor. On the other hand, democratic style emphasizes participative decision making in which decision is sought to be made in support group among all those involved in the process. Implementation of the decision becomes easier under this form of approach because all concerned parties have provided some degree of input. However, the democratic approach may not be suitable in certain situations, particularly those in which time efficiency is critical. A laissez-faire decision style would be the one in which final decision outcomes emerge with little or no direction from those in the leadership positions. The use of this particular decision style is not strongly advocated because it tends to be highly risky and there is no sound method for gauging anticipated reactions from postponing action. Although these three decision-making styles are distinct, most managers have characteristics more than one style. Decision-making process. Decision-making is a difficult exercise in reality. It is not a simple act of choosing among alternatives. As Itzioni says, decision-making falls between policy formation and implementation. However, they are closely interwoven with decisions affecting implementations and initial implementations affecting later stages of decision-making, which in turn affect later implementation. Coming to identification of a problem. The first stage of the decision-making process begins with the identification of a problem, or more specifically, a discrepancy between an existing and a desired state of affairs. Thus, the stage of identification of a problem takes into consideration, first, the existence of discrepancy, second, the resources necessary to take action, and third, the pressure required to act. Coming to the identification of a decision criterion. The second stage requires identification of decision criteria, that is, management should assess what factors are relevant in making a decision. The items in the criteria should thus be weighed in order to give them the correct priority in the decision. Next, developing alternatives. The third stage in the decision process involves the development of alternatives. This stage requires the decision maker to list the viable alternatives that could resolve the problem. The development of alternatives in the public sector raises the debate of rationalism versus incrementalism. James Bryan Quinn refers to this approach as logical incrementalism. Rather than concentrate on a few select alternatives, we tend to focus on a range, excluding for the most part the extremes. Coming to evaluating alternatives, once the alternatives have been identified, the decision maker should critically analyze each alternative by appraising it against the criteria. This stage of the decision process, the evaluation of alternatives, is the area in which we often associate the use of analytical tools and techniques for making decisions. Analytical tools and techniques should not be viewed as a replacement for managers. Rather, they are supportive methods for allowing managers to make better decisions. Coming to selection of solution, it should be noted that the selection of solution is largely dependent on the method of evaluation that has been utilized in this stage. For example, the nature of the critical path method is to select the optimal path based on the allocation of resources as well as time. Cost benefit analysis should similarly select the program or service option that yields the greatest net benefit to net cost. The increasing introduction of computer-based techniques into office and work setup has also greatly contributed to the selection of solutions. In many cases, administrators, that is those in the upper levels of management, have a tendency to also rely on their intuition and experience in selecting and backing a particular solution. But they may have to face problems when public inquiries are conducted. Finally, selection of the solution, particularly in the public sector, involves the necessity for a trade-off between efficiency and equity. Coming to implementation of solution. Although the selection of decision is completed, the decision may still fail if it is not implemented. Implementation includes conveying the decision to the people who must support it and carry it out enthusiastically. For the implementation of a decision, the manager may adopt an autocratic or democratic style. If this priority is the relative quality of the decision, then an autocratic approach is called for in which implantation of the decision is necessary. On the other hand, if the priority is acceptance of the decision as opposed to its quality, then a democratic approach is appropriate. In both the cases, the individual may be trading off time at certain phases of the process. Next, evaluating decision effectiveness. The final stage in the decision-making process evaluates the result of the decision to see whether the problem has been fully resolved. If the problem still continues, the management then needs to dissect carefully what went wrong. It might be possible that the alternative selected had not been properly evaluated or implemented, or the problem incorrectly defined. It might even require starting the entire decision process again. In the public sector, this is particularly critical as tools for program and service evaluation still tend to be rudimentary and under the control of such groups as parliamentary committees like the Public Accounts Committee, the Committee on Public Undertakings, the Estimates Committee, Office of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, Public Inquiry Commissions and Program Evaluation Organization of the former Planning Commission, and so on. Certain states and localities also have companion organizations, but in general, formal feedback and evaluative mechanisms for most public managers are not widely in place, giving way in most important instances to such alternative evaluative means are legislative oversight, hearings, and the like. To improve this last phase, effort is needed to tie such evaluation to the previously articulated standards as well as the initial problem or issue. Public policy making is the principal function of the state. Since its formulation is a complex and dynamic process, no theoretical model is adequate to explain the policy decision totally. Public policy making is a complex dynamic process whose components make different contributions to it. It decides major guidelines for action directed at the future, mainly by the governmental organs. These guidelines and alternatives formally aim at achieving what is in the public interest by the best possible means. First, comment on the types of decisions while elaborating on programmed and non-programmed decisions. Second, identify various alternatives in decision making and explain the way to choose best alternatives. Third, what is decision evaluation? Describe the selection of solutions in decision making process.